to clean them up, I normally just pick them off with a knife. Now, when you're picking these things off with a knife, because it's a round surface, just pick it off like, and angle your knife upwards as you go into it, just to pick it off from one side, then pick it off from the other, until you get it down fairly close to the surface. The reason to angle your knife up and pick upwards is because if you try and slice straight across it, sometimes the blade will dig in and slice a flat straight across that part. And there's nothing worse than having a flat part on one of your road wheels, because you try and file it back to get it round again, but then half the wheel is filed down so it's not even, and so on. So yeah, just pick off the majority of it like that. Once I get it right down fairly close, then I just use the file, and you can feel the part on the file as you run the file over it. Now again, don't run your file straight across, because if you cut through the part, I just sort of run the file and twist it over the top of the part, like just push it over on a semicircular motion over the top, and you can feel as you go through that tab that you've left on there, you'll feel as the file goes through it, and it'll disappear, and all of a sudden the file will be smooth as it runs over, and you can't feel it grabbing on anything, so you know then you've got that little part cut off. So again, on the other side, just pick off the majority of it with the knife, just get the file to run over it fairly quickly, like so, a little bit of a burr on there, and that's it, nice and clean. Do the other part, join them together, and repeat that up to 25 times for all the road wheels. Okay, let's move on. Just one more quick little thing on working with road wheels that I forgot to put in before when I was talking, is that after you've been over these with the file, sometimes if you look close enough, the file will leave marks on there, so just grab a little bit of sandpaper and just quickly run over, like I've just got a little bit of old used sandpaper here, and just give it a quick rub over like so, and yeah, there's no file marks on there. The other thing is, if you do ruin a road wheel, like you end up with a flat surface on there or whatever, what you can do is when you put the road wheel on, if it allows you to, if there's not pins that center it or whatever, you put it on, turn it around so that the mistake will actually be against the track when you put the track on, and the track should cover it up, especially if it's the top of the track running over it and you won't see it, because the track will overhang the side of the wheel and you won't be able to see it. On the bottom, maybe if you get down to eye level and look back in, you'll see a flat spot against the track, but generally no, you won't, because people don't get down and look at that level unless you're judging, and you know, it comes down to that sort of thing where you go through and you actually start looking at the road wheels, looking for little bits of dag that are hanging on there, or glue overhanging certain parts, or whatever it may be, but generally you won't see it. So if you make a mistake, put the track against the mistake, and it will disappear. The other thing is, a lot of times with road wheels, there will be a seam that'll run down the centre of the road wheel, and that really does have to be cleaned up, because yeah, they won't have a seam running down the middle of them. Even the rubber, when you've got rubber runners, unless they're brand new runners, they might have a seam on them, but normally after they've been running for a few hours, those seams are gone, so they should be flat. So once they're together, just run the file, like I say, in a semicircular motion over the part, like so, and that'll take those seams off. Another thing I've seen people do, and I have tried it myself, but it seems to be too much drama to do, but what they do is they actually attach this to like a Dremel, like a rotary tool, and turn the tool on so the wheel's spinning around, and then they put it against a flat piece of sandpaper, and that'll just instantly clean it off. And I mean, obviously yes, that works well, but yeah, it seems like a lot of mucking around to get, you know, go through one at a time, setting them up on a Dremel tool. The other reason people use the Dremels too, that I have seen, is if you're going to do a burnt out tank and the rubber idlers and so on, the rubber will burn off if the tank's been burnt, and what they do, they attach it to the Dremel tool. Again, they get it spinning, but this time I've seen them actually use the tip of a knife as it's spinning, and just run the tip of the knife through like that, and it'll slowly cut down the part that's rubber on the runner. And when they get down to where they think the rim would be, then you stop, and that's how you get rid of the rubber on them. Trying to file that that amount of rubber off, believe me, I tried it, and yeah, it's a very tedious task, too tedious. Okay, so we're up to the part where we've got the lower hole with the idlers put on there and the inside put in. Now we're up to doing the suspension, the springs and so on. Now, part of these springs, there's a problem. There's a seam line running right down the middle of the spring, right down there. And where you have to cut it away from the sprue, it leaves a little tab just in there which meets a rounded surface, so you have to be careful when you trim this off. Now you won't be able to see this on the video, but I'll put up a photo so you can see where the seam is. Now these seams are the ones that on the first model I did of this particular tank from the Semovente kit had the same seam line running in the middle, and like I say, at that stage I wasn't that particularly worried about things like that when I was modelling. I was just getting things together and painting them, and once I painted it, that seam line really stood out, so I'm definitely going to make sure I clean it up on this. Now it's a bit hard because it's stepped. Being a spring, there's leaves that step down, and each leaf has to be cleaned individually, so it's a bit of a time consuming thing, but it really has to be done, otherwise yeah, it will stand out and you will see it clearly once there's paint on there. So I'll go ahead and start cleaning up. Now cleaning up these springs has turned out to be fairly painful. It's been a mixture of using the knife to pick out parts of the seam and also using my needle file. But just be careful with the file, make sure you get it on a nice square angle, because if you don't, the leaf that you run against will actually end up being uneven. So your springs won't look right because they'll have uneven surfaces as they step down. And it's always hard with parts like that with this delicate sort of detail to know if you've got all that seam or not. So one of the things I do to check to make sure that I've got everything is I just use a little bit of this, just a little bit of dark grey paint. You don't need much, you only need like just a dab, and just a nice soft bristled brush. That one there will do fine. Okay, and we just run just a little bit of paint right down where the seam was. Now when that dries, that'll show up. If you've left any of the seam there, as that paint dries, you'll see it, it'll stand right out, and you'll know that you have to go in and clean those little bits up. So that's just a little tip to help you with cleaning up seams on parts like this. I do this with aircraft seams and all sorts of seams. I always put a little bit of paint on after I think I've cleaned it up, just to check to make sure that I've got it, because there's nothing worse than thinking you've cleaned a seam up, put the paint on, and then all of a sudden there's a seam standing out. So yeah, always just do that just to check to make sure you've got it all. Now this part of the build-up, we have the two halves of some of the suspension. Now these two halves just fit together